Welcome aboard the Beseto Express. We'll cover 3 countries: Beijing in China, Seoul in Korea, and Tokyo in Japan. Together we'll explore the culture of Beseto. All aboard the Beseto Express!
It has been 104 years since the first film was screened by the Lumiere Brothers in 1895. Films, which were amazing sights of wonder in the past, have now become flowers of popular culture. Films which were born from the combination of science and art reflect the native colors and expressions of the different nations, including the 3 Beseto countries. Korean films with an 80-year history are drawn with tranquil colors and have many scenes of recollecting the past and scenes of stillness and solitude. In contrast, Chinese films are colored with powerful tones, as if erupting the desires inside humans. Their films give off fiery red colors. And they also overwhelm the audience with their powerful pictures of vast lands. Japan shows off the longest history of films among the 3 Beseto countries. The unique characteristic of Japanese films is the format of visually expressing the inner motions of humans with delicacy and sensitivity. As such, the films of the 3 Beseto countries have their own distinct colors. Let's meet the cultures reflected in their films.
Welcome to Beseto Express. Have you seen a film called Cinema Paradiso? In this Italian film, the cinema theater was a place where you can find peace, and the films were paradise in which dreams came true. Even though films have changed and developed enormously, they still reflect the dreams of the common people. Also, wherever country it may be, their favorite dating course is going to see a good movie at a cinema. Now then, shall we view the films of Korea, China, and Japan and go on a date with the people of the 3 Beseto countries?
Laying out its first step in 1919, the Korean film industry goes through the regaining of independence and the turbulence of war. Its first age of revival was not until the late 1950s. Films reflected the chaotic pictures of society and spoke out for the pains and struggles of the period. With such films criticizing society, another common subject was anti-communist films. Under government support, numerous anti-communist films were produced, attracting audiences and enlightening people in large scales. Korean films, which were looking for a new road with the rapid economic development in the 1970s, started to draw themes of the repressed youth and the dark sides of society excluded from development. Korean films, which started to advance into world stages in 1980, are broadening their range of audiences with a variety of different genres of film, from those criticizing society, action, to comedy. From low-budget independent films in which one person handles multiple roles, to big-size films produced by investing huge amounts of money and thorough planning. The modern films of Korea are preparing for the new future of Korean films, each in different ways.
한국 영화는 비교적 굉장히 젊은 영화라는 표현을 쓰고 싶습니다. 최근에 이제 조금 과거라든가 어떤 남녀 연애담이 아닌 조금 더 사회적인 어떤 여러 문제를 건드리는 것들이 나오지만 여전히 주류는 젊은 남녀 또 그런 사람들이 공유할 수 있는 이야기가 굉장히 양적으로 많다는 것이 특징일 수 있습니다.
Ever since the first screening in Beijing in 1903, the film scene of China meets its first golden age in 1930. And with the harsh reality of 1940, with the Japanese invasion and economic crisis, it produced films based on realism. The early generations of Chinese film passed as such, but with the establishment of the China's People's Republic in 1949, Chinese films now colored tones of social realism, and most of them became propaganda films advocating revolutionary ideas. These second-generation film directors made films relating peacefully and unbendingly to reality. The start of the Cultural Revolution in 1966 brought the Dark Ages to Chinese film. Making films was even suspended for some time during this period. They went through many hardships during this period and only reawoke after the 1970s. In the Chinese film scene, which was led by the third generation, a new fourth generation of film directors appeared. Films broke away from the former tools of propaganda and became reborn as a genre of art. Chinese films met their height of prosperity in the 1980s. As the whole of China was swept with the winds of change, films developed with more speed and released deeply artistic pictures that saw through the inner minds of humans and attracted the world's attention. The period of the 1970s was considered the beginning of the group of Chinese elite film directors, or fourth-generation directors. The flow of Chinese films that began from those directors who had experienced the Cultural Revolution was continued by fifth-generation directors like Chen Kai-go and Zhang Yimou, and is being continued today with the sixth generation. Those directors are pursuing universal globalism.
那时候呢，大的社会背景也使得我们民族文化有一个振兴，因为是民族斗争。 就是抗日战争前后，命运遭遇，写对人性的压抑，对那个时代的一种反思，对极左思想的一种批判。
The Japanese film scene, which developed in size and technology, advanced overseas with this film. In the Woods by director Kurosawa Akira became the foundation that brought the flourishing days of Japanese film. Japanese films began to focus in tradition once again, and the samurai became the best subject, appearing in numerous films and attracting popularity. However, with the spread of TV in the 1960s, Japanese films went through a crisis that could have pulled out their roots entirely. After entering into the 1970s, Japanese films searched for another breakthrough, and they found their solution in animation. Through this film you are seeing now, called My Neighbor Totoro, which was just simply thought of as cartoons for children, was reborn into a form of dramatic film and fixed the position of animated films in the film industry. In present day, animated films have broadened its market to half the size of Japan's entire film industry, and they have developed to the standard of which adults can see and enjoy them as well, and now leading the Japanese film industry. In the 90s, Japanese films don't stick to tradition or a specific genre, but pursue a variety of genres, and films of light romantic comedies that are liked by women have become the mainstream film. This is because of the trend of wanting to make films that will be successful at the box office, rather than making films that reflect the times or society.
無条件にヒットするのはアニメーションですけどね、実写のドラマで考えると、韓国でね言われるような歴史ものとか民族のアイデンティティとかですね、そういうところに遡ってルーツをたどるようなことで、国民的な人気を得るというふうなことは女の人がね 気楽に入れる、少しエロティックな映画。
The history of film is said to be a small-scale model of society's history. Since films were made to be viewed by an audience, it was made to suit the emotions of the people of a period, and their subjects reflect the taste and wants of the people. As such, films have very strong individualities, unique styles, and feelings. Well, shall we find out the different characteristics of films of China, Japan, and Korea?
The film director that has changed something that is most Korean to something that is most global through his film, Im Kwon-taek. He is regarded as the greatest master of Korean film.
Ready. Test, ready. Go, go.
For almost 40 years, director Im Kwon-taek has expressed his understanding and love for humans in his films. Among them, the lives of the forsaken and the adverse fortunes and lives of the Korean women appear as his favorite subjects. Director Im Kwon-taek especially well expresses the griefs, longing, and heart-aching cries of the Korean people. Director Im Kwon-taek's deep understanding of humans is especially well expressed in the Korean subjects and pictures of his films. Through the empty-looking and temperate pictures that don't seem to easily reveal the change of emotions, it gives a sense of latitude of mind to the viewer. And his works also show the pains of the Korean people and the scars of the nation's division. Through his films, director Im Kwon-taek asks the audience who really is the victim of war and who really is the provider of war. And, at the end, leaves a powerful message of the harmony between the Korean people.
임권택 감독의 영화를 보면 한국이 보인다고 말해요. 외국에서는. 다시 말해서 한국 사회의 변화, 사람들의 삶의 모습, 그야말로 한국이란 땅에서 한국 사람들이 어떻게 살아가고 있는가를 껍데기가 아닌 그 속 내용 자체를 굉장히 보여주죠.
The pioneer director of the fifth generation leading the globalization of Chinese films, Chen Kai-ge. His films have always revealed a strong sense of criticism to the political system. Through this film of his from 1991 about the life of a musician, he asks the question of the purpose of life and shows a deep understanding of life itself. The life of the musician revealed through restrained lines and the magnificent pictures of the vast lands of China in the background. After, he once again shows the world the artistic qualities of Chinese films through the most Chinese film called Farewell My Concubine. His thoughts about history are not just an inquiry or study, but they have developed even to the point of a responsibility to Chen Kai-ge, and such an element controls most of his films. Having experienced the whirlpool of the Cultural Revolution in person, he always sways his knife of social criticism in films. So, he had to suffer restrictions from the Chinese government, which even made him move to the US at one point in time. His sixth feature dramatic film, completed in 1996, called Temperance Moon, was banned from screening because of the reason that its theme deals with sex and opium during the modern history of China. But the world once again focused their eyes on director Chen Kai-ge. Maybe that is the reason he cannot leave China's land, as his saying, "You are as free as you are suppressed." The greatest figure of Japanese culture, and the figure that gave the most influence to the world's history of films, director Kurosawa Akira. Noted for his film directing that overcomes the limitations of Japan, he was even acclaimed as the textbook of film directing because of his speedy story progression and fine portrayal of characters in his historical film, The Seven Samurai.
したのになぜ戻るんじゃい。
The great master that has expressed intense humanism and a serious inquiry into the instincts of human nature through remarkable and artistic works of pictures. And with his masterpiece, Kakemusa, he acquired world fame as the director that represents Japan. Although some of his films about tradition were not liked by the Japanese people because they were considered not Japanese, they were very much applauded by Westerners. His films are often remade in Hollywood. The Seven Samurai became the classic piece of Western movies called The Seven Men of the Desert. Recently, a film called Yojinbo was screened to an audience with the title Last Man Standing. Heightening the level of tension through the harmony of moving actions, remarkable formality, silent images, and the use of techniques of montage and long takes, director Kurosawa Akira was a filmmaker who showed much passion to filmmaking, even directing scenes at an age over 80. Korean films paint the traditional and alienated lives of the common people and their strong attachment to life and their loved ones with tranquility, and draws a deep sense of affection towards humans from its viewers. The color that comes to mind when we think of the Chinese films, red. Red, which is the representative color of China, is not just a color, but it blows life and movement into the films of China. The tatami shot, which gives a feeling of looking up from the floor. As such, Japanese films have developed such unique visual languages for a more delicate expression than the human emotion itself. Films are a form of creative culture that have their own color and language.
People say film is a combined art. In a film, you can see all the genres of art of a society in one view. It's the easiest and most certain way to experience aesthetic consciousness and standard of culture of a nation. However, Japan was the first country out of the 3 Beseto countries to start the history of films. The fast-changing ideas of society are reflected in the films of China, and in the films of Korea possesses infinite possibilities with its diverse genres and unique sentiments. The lives of the Beseto people can be melted away in the films of the 3 Beseto countries. Well, that's all for today, and I hope you'll join me again on our next Beseto Express.